This is James Katigan interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends, Oklahoma Christian College, Oklahoma Historical Society of Oklahoma City on October the 24th, 1972. We are interviewing Mrs. Mary E. Haley, Haley. Mrs. Haley lives 1.5 miles south and 1.5 miles east of Hopeton, Oklahoma. Mrs. Haley, let's start this interview by having you tell us something about your coming to Oklahoma, about your parents and your background.
I was born in Fayette County, Ohio, near Sabine, in 1897. Moved to Indiana with my parents, and then on to Oklahoma in 1908. We brought all of everything we owned to Oklahoma by train. Cows, horses, dogs, chickens, and everything. And when we came, my father bought 80 acres, 3 miles south and 3 west of Alva. And we were there for a short time, then we moved to where I live now, 1.5 miles south and 1.5 miles east of Hopeton.
Mrs. Haley, tell us about your early education endeavors. About when, do you remember when you first started to school and some of the things that might have happened during this period?
I attended a one-room school, and it was 1 mile from where I lived, and sometimes we could walk and get there when we couldn't drive. The roads were so bad, so muddy. I had 1 year of schooling under my sister's teaching, and that was just something I'll never forget because it was an outstanding year.
Ms. Haley, do you remember when you first moved here to Alva with your parents? What took place on the way, and how'd you arrive here in Alva?
We would get ready. It would take us several days. We'd be getting ready to come and have everything to start so we could leave home real early in the morning. And when we came out here to the Young place, we went down in the canyon, and the dust was so thick and so deep that we'd have to just bring some washcloths and things along to get that dust off before we could go in the stores. There was no way of getting by without that. And one thing that I do remember when we came through the canyon was an old marked grave off to the west. And we always looked for that. It was an early day pioneer that was buried there. It took us 2 hours or 3, sometimes 3, to come to Alva and the same time to go home. So it was really something that we worked to get ready to do that.
What mode of transportation did you have? Evidently it was wagons moved you in here to Alva.
It was wagons, and school.
Yes.
And when my sister and I came here to attend the normal, my father and mother moved us here in the lumber wagon, and we brought everything that we needed to live, and we had one room. It was located on 4th and what is now Oklahoma Boulevard, and I brought my saddle horse, and I kept him in a little barn in the backyard, and my sister and I lived in this one room. We had our stove, our bed, and everything that we needed to live there. And when I went downtown, there was no paved streets, not any pavement, and I rode my horse. My father had bought him from Mr. Noy, east of Alva, and this horse was a real fine one. And one day I was riding him downtown, and the sprinkler had gone along, and the dust was so thick, and it was so slick after they had sprinkled the street that he fell with me on the north side of the square. One other trouble we had was keeping our heels out of the cracks in the sidewalk. They were bored, and sometimes we had to take our feet out of our shoes, get our heels out of the cracks.
How about the winters during this time? Was there very much of a problem getting around in the wintertime, since we didn't have to have at that time too many automobiles? How did you get along those days?
Well, just with the horses. We got along with the horses, and no other way. We didn't even know what a car was. We seldom ever saw one at that time.
Mrs. Haley, for the graduation exercises, how did these exercises go off these days? Did they have them very much like we do now, or were there little special occasions for each graduate?
My mother and Dad had me go to Avard and take the 8th grade examination. And we went from Avard to Alva for the commencement exercise by train, the Santa Fe train. And it was quite a celebration, and a large group of young boys and girls who graduated.
Mrs. Haley, now, about your husband and your family, let's get a little background on each of them now. For instance, what did your husband do, and also were you here in Alva and working on the ranch or the farm? And about the members of your family.
My husband was James W. Haley, and he was a farmer. His mother and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Dan Haley. He was a wonderful fellow.
Just say that about him. Mrs. Haley, when were you married and where?
Married in 1917 in the house that I live in now. I've had it all remodeled and repainted. And my husband was an outgoing person, a wonderful personality. We had 3 children. Our first child we lost when he was 2 years old, Charles Daniel James. Then Nelson L. Haley and Lee R. Haley.
Where are your children located now, Mrs. Haley? And tell us something about your children and their wives, and also about your grandchildren.
Mr. and Mrs. Nelson Haley, they're in Oklahoma City. He's district manager of Equitable Life Assurance. And his wife, Olita Roush Haley, is RN, graduated from St. Francis in Wichita. Lee R. Haley is in the school system here in Alva. He's principal of the Longfellow School, and he farms, and his wife, Mary Haley, is clerk at the draft board. I have two grandsons, Mike Haley. He's married to Judy Lowe, and they live in Houston, Texas. Mike is a CPA, and Judy graduated from Texas University a year ago. Jim Haley, my other grandson, is in his third year at OSU.
Ms. Haley, since you are still living in the house that you are married in, tell us what has taken place at this house since all this time you used it. I know it's no longer a house, it's a home, and we'd like to have a description of your place out there on the farm.
We were married in the northeast room by Reverend Woodworth from Avard. He gave us a gift from him and his wife, a plate, beautiful plate, and now my grandson in Houston has that plate. Everything around that farm we cherish. There's so many memories. And it has had to be remodeled and repaired and painted and a new roof. And I thought I would go around one more time and stay there, try it again. So that's the reason that we have done this. The barn was built in 1916, and my father built the barn. It cost him $500 to build it. Nelson and Leroy both wanted that barn to stay on the farm, so a few years ago I had it repaired and repainted. And it is still there just like it was many, many years ago. We have the cave and the sleeping house. My mother and father put the sleeping house there. It's built over the cave, and it has the windows that we can put up and stay in there in the summertime. It's real comfortable. However, now it's about full of antiques. Phonographs, the cabinet that my mother and dad had when they moved here is in that sleeping house, and it still has their things in the cabinet like they were when they passed away. The razor and the shaving mug, their medicine, which consisted of a bottle of liniment and a little bit of salve. That was just about all they had.
Mrs. Haley, what county is your farm, and how many acres do you have on your farm?
I have 400 acres, and it's in Woods County.
Mm. And the farm you're now living on, how many acres do you have there? 160
acres where I live.
Ms. Woods, tell us something about these grandchildren at Oklahoma City. How do they like to come to the farm?
They do like to come, and they like to drive the tractor and to be out there, and they like the chickens and the cats and the dog and everything that's on that farm. They are wonderful, outgoing fellows, and I really appreciate them coming.
Do you recollect or remember, and can you give us a story about something that might have happened, or say during the winter or some hot summers or stormy? Did you ever remember any storms that elements might have looked like they was going to do things to you?
Yes. I remember one storm especially, and it was in the summertime, so hot, and we had gone to bed. We had our grandson, Mike, with us, and the phone rang, and one of my neighbors, Harry Nelson's wife, said, "See cyclone, see cyclone." So we rushed to the cave, and after we had gotten to the cave, my husband said, "Well, some of the buildings are still standing because I can see the lights." And So we got down in the cave, and it was so terrible, and we could hear boards flying and breaking, and the wind was so terrific. My husband, I was holding my grandson, and my husband leaned over his head and put a coat over his head, so if something came through the cave door, that he would be safe. After the storm was over and we went up, my husband said, well, I can hear cattle bawling, I can hear children crying, and people howling. And so many of the homes in that neighborhood, they were completely destroyed. The Everett Hopeton farm that joins where I live now was gone, and he was there along with his children. His wife was in the hospital, and he had to get those children out, and my husband, he didn't get his clothes on when we went to the cave. He had his nightgown and his shoes on, and he put a raincoat on top of that nightgown and got the tractor and went up and down the road, and those things were going on until morning.
When the storm was over, did you have many of your neighbors that seemed to be hurt or injured or suffered much loss? And did some of them come out to the farm to check up on you folks?
Yes, there was a tremendous loss, and so many people were out on the road that night, and Uncle Hank Quinlan, they could not get out. And Harry Nelson managed to get his car out of his garage that was damaged so bad and got Uncle Hank and Aunt Jessie to our place. Our grandson didn't go to sleep that night. I held him all night. We were all real frightened.
Ms. Haley, you have a sister here in Alva too, do you not?
I have a widowed sister. She's in the hospital here in Alva. She'll soon be 85 years old. She has lived in the Hopeton community all these years, and we've always been real close. She lost her husband last spring.
Ms. Haley, does all your neighbors and your friends look on life as being so pleasant as you do? You certainly have a pleasant disposition, and I know you must have a lot of wonderful friends and neighbors.
I have never seen such a community as I live in. They're so great. I do not know words to describe them and the feeling that I have toward that community. We chat over the phone, and if there's any trouble, they're so willing and so ready to be there. And that's the reason that I don't want to leave. I want to stay there just as long as I can. They are so great. I did buy a little property here in Alva and tried to live here, but I was so homesick, and I would come up and try to stay one night, and there's no place to walk or no place to go, or just around the house. So I went back to the farm to live. I expect to end my days there if I can. I hope I can.
We have just had a most pleasant interview with Mrs. Mary E. Haley. Mrs. Haley lives 1.5 miles south and 1.5 miles east of Hopeton, Oklahoma. This interview is made today, October 24th, 1972, by James Katigan from Alva, Oklahoma, for the Oklahoma Living Legends and the Oklahoma Historical Society. Today,